Hi, today I'm going to hopefully answer lots and lots of questions that I've had about how to cover spots, how to put foundation on if you've got acne or dry skin or rosacea, all of these problems. And I'm lucky enough to have a beautiful model today. I've got Madeline, who not only is beautiful but also is very brave to come here and be filmed without any makeup on at all. So thank you so much for doing that.
Welcome.
And yeah, so hopefully this film is going to answer lots and lots of your questions. Before I start doing Madeline's makeup, I just want to just describe a little bit my philosophy when I'm making up models or celebrities or people that have quite bad skin, acne, that sort of thing, lots of spots. I tend to feel that when you ask somebody how much of their face they need covering, people who've got spots, I mean, they tend to say, oh, you know, what percentage of your face? And they'll be like, oh, 70%, you know, is spots. Then you take all their makeup off and you'll find they've got a sort of cluster here, a couple there. And it's probably about, you know, maximum about 15%. And the rest of the skin on their face is absolutely perfect. It looks great. And that tends to be how I think about when I'm dealing with acne skin. I think about the skin in between the acne to start off with. So lots of people don't, you know, sort of have bad spots sort of across here. I mean, obviously some people do, but there's certain areas of faces that, you know, there won't be any spots. And I try to embellish that skin and make that skin look as natural and as beautiful as possible. So I always start off with a very light base when I'm doing people with spots all over, and that's sort of just to even out the skin tone. And then I'll think, right, where's the areas, where's the spots? And then I'll just start to build up the makeup, either using a concealer or using a much heavier foundation just in those areas, so that I feel that when that person meets other people, because most people make contact with your eyes anyway, I feel like if a lot of the skin, especially around your eyes, is quite unmade up, not too much foundation, people tend to look there anyway, and they don't focus necessarily on the areas where you most tend to get acne, which is, you know, jawline, chin, forehead. And if some of the face has got hardly any foundation on or just a light amount, it almost creates an illusion whereby the viewer, the person looking at that person, feels that they haven't got much makeup on and they haven't got spots. Whereas sometimes I think that the sort of the urge is, if you've got quite a few spots, just to put on a blanket thick foundation. You know, not only is it covering the spots, but it's also covering all the good skin and the bits of the skin where actually you've got some lovely natural luminosity. And so that's how I tend to view it. I tend to view it that I think about the skin overall and try and make that as beautiful as possible. And then I think about covering the acne. Even if it means I end up covering a lot of it with heavier foundation or concealer, I feel like the bits in between and all the other bits that I don't put the heaviness on is the bits that eventually will let the natural texture and the beauty sort of shine through. And because a lot of young people have spots, and they're the ones that have the most beautiful skin because they've got the tight contours and the lovely luminosity. And I just hate to feel that I'm just going to put on this blanket, you know, coverage all over, powder, you know, loads of mineral powder, loads of everything, just deaden everything down. So it does take a little bit longer doing it this way, but I just feel, for me, it feels the right way to do it. It's just my personal philosophy on the whole thing. It's the way I did my makeup when I used to have really quite bad skin, and it's certainly the way I do when I'm working with clients and people. So I hope it's helpful. Right, I'm going to start with, this is a primer. This is La Roche-Posay, and it's a pro recovery skincare. It's sort of a, people use it actually after cosmetic peels, but I find it to be quite a good primer if you have any dryness in your skin. It's not greasy and it dries quite matte, but it's very, very smoothing. And it just gives a, because your skin is a combination, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got some really dry patches and it feels quite dehydrated as well. So it's just to make it trickier for yourself. You've got a mixture of everything going on. To start off, I'm going to put a really thin base on using Clinique Redness Solutions, and this is a makeup which has got quite healing technology, so it's going to help with the breakouts, but also it's going to reduce the redness. And I'm not using this to cover the spots. I just want to get a nice thin base all over, and then I'm going to come back and cover any of the spots afterwards, because the majority of Madeleine's skin is perfectly clear. Next, I'm going to use some Becca Shimmering Skin Perfector. I'm just going to use this here. So the base itself is really just for evening out the skin tone and the redness, but we haven't done any spot concealing yet. Now I'm going to use some under eye concealer. Look up for me. And then we'll go on to conceal. Okay, now for the concealer, I'm going to use, Vichy has teamed up with Dermablend, and what Vichy have done is they've sort of started doing sticks, so there's concealing sticks and there's also foundation, and they've made Dermablend more accessible, more usable. It still's got the good coverage, but anyone can use it now. It's much easier to use. I'm going to show you just with the foundation, because we don't need it all over. Just going to show, because you get really good coverage and you don't need very much of this at all. Just buff over the areas where there's any spots, but really blending it in with the surrounding skin. You can see it's just really covering them, but it doesn't look like there's too much makeup on there. I'm sort of thinning it out and only using a tiny amount. I think that's what's nice about this product. You hardly need any. And what we can do is we can come back, once we've done the majority, we can just come back and using a tiny brush, we can just actually cover individual sort of centres of any marks or any spots. So I'm just literally buffing on the Dermablend just in the areas where the spots are. And because I'm giving it a really thin edge, you don't sort of see where it suddenly turns into much thinner foundation in between. And even on the redder areas, you can just apply a little bit. There's hardly any on that brush now at all. It's almost completely empty. Let me just see before I go and do the So what I've done, we've gone all over with the sheerish foundation, the thinner one, the Clinique, and then just buffing into the more sort of spotty areas with the Vichy Dermablend. And then what you can do, you can then go with a much smaller brush, either with a little bit more of the Dermablend or something a little bit heavier concealer. These are also good, they do sticks as well, so it's still the Vichy Dermablend, but you can use it more like just a regular concealer rather than using the liquid. And then you can just sort of target in if there's any that need a little bit more concealing. You just pat that in. Again, you don't need to put very much on the brush, you only need a very small amount, hardly any. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use the powder that comes with it, which is the Dermablend powder. You can use any powder, but I thought I'd try this out. I'm going to use a sponge just on the areas where I've done most of my dermablending, my concealing, just to set that, have a little bit more powder around those areas and then much less on the rest of the face, because I want to cheat the illusion that we haven't got very much makeup on here at all. So I'm just going to set slightly spottier areas first, and then using a brush I'm going to use a lot less, or I can use any powder really, everywhere else. And I think what's nice now is that I have very little foundation on the forehead, not too much around this area here in the centre, and then we've just got quite a bit of concealing work here. But I think the first thing you notice when you look at Madeline is not that there's a like a mask-like effect foundation all over, and I think it's amazing how much you can get away with. You can get away with having quite a lot in this area if you sort of keep less on the other areas. And I'm just going to keep this area around the eyes really clear, and I think that's what's nice about having a little bit of the highlighter on as well there, because it gives the illusion of very fresh, sort of clear skin. So that tends to be how I like to deal with any acne problems. I'm not one for just putting on a really heavy base all over. If I can, I leave lots of areas quite clear, quite clean, with very little base on. And then in certain areas I'll put quite a lot on, but try and almost smooth out the area rather than just put on a kind of mask. And how does that feel, that
feels really light
stuff? Yeah, it feels quite light to use. It's amazing. I mean, a little, when I say a little goes a long way, I think I can't kind of overemphasize that enough. I mean, you hardly need any on the brush, and just touching them, they just completely disappear. So I'm quite pleased with that.
It's flawless.
Yeah, you look great. I'm going to give you a look now, but that's for another video. So thank you, Maddie, and thanks for watching.